Hello again, everyone. Today I have some watercolor samples that I'm going to swatch for you all. These have actually been sitting around for quite a while. I originally got them so that I could swatch them on the channel, but then they eventually got covered in all kinds of stuff that was in my office, and then I found them again. So I figured I would now share them. And these colors should all still be available, so it's not an issue of them being unavailable anymore. So I have some Core watercolor samples, and Core is actually one of my favorite watercolor brands. They're made by the company that makes golden acrylic paints, and their paints are super, super saturated and really, they flow really nicely. They have an unusual, well, yeah, I guess it's unusual, additive that makes the watercolors flow really well into each other. So we'll see if we can see some of that action happening. They were really skimpy on their samples here. They only gave like a tiny little dot of each here that we're going to be testing. I'll go through which colors they are. And they did include a pretty high quality watercolor sample here, or paper sample. And let me think about whether I want to do it on this or in my normal swatch book. I think for now I'm just going to do it in the normal swatch book. That way it's kind of consistent with the other swatches I've been doing on the channel, and I don't know which paper this is, so I wouldn't be able to tell you based on the swatches. All right, so that's the core samples. And then I also have some samples of the Cheap Joe's brand watercolors. And actually, so since I got this little sample thing, I did actually get a full tube of one of their colors. I think it was flamingo, so it was like a pink mixed with white. And it's actually a pretty decent watercolor, but this will give us sort of the basic watercolor colors to test out. So let's start with this one, because I actually know the most about the core watercolors, so we'll save sort of what I assume will be the best for last. And I apologize if my hands are a little shaky today. I had to take my inhaler this morning, and it always makes my hands shaky. So bad air quality here in Denver, making it hard for me to breathe. All right, so before we start here, I'm going to add a little drop of water to each of these. This isn't always necessary, but I have noticed that watercolors do flow a lot better when you do that at the beginning and just let the water sit there for a little while. And in fact, I'm going to do that with the core watercolors. I'm going to open up this little sample booklet here and put some water on those samples as well, so those can kind of get going while we do these. Okay. And I think we actually have a more diverse range of colors with the core colors as well. All right, so the first color here in the Cheap Joe's brand is Joe's Yellow. I think these are all the Joe named colors: Joe's Yellow, Joe's Red, Joe's Blue, and Joe's Green, which is a phthalo green. And these are all single pigments. So this one is, like I said, that Joe's Yellow. I'm actually going to put these out of the frame here and zoom in just a little bit so that you can see those a little better. Okay, so that's nice. That's a very nice yellow. So that is PY 154. And then let's go on to the Joe's Red. Oops. Got my finger in the core colors there. Don't want to do that. Okay, so this is the Joe's Red. Oh, that's really a saturated, nice color. These have flowed really well and they've moistened really easily, so that's kind of nice. This is PR 254. So with a lot of these pigment numbers, you can get the same pigment numbers across different brands. Sometimes they will look a little different, and sometimes they'll be pretty similar. The pigment number is probably the way to go to identify, you know, what color you're actually going to be getting, as opposed to the name, because names can vary, obviously. But different brands do have different concentration of pigments in their paints, different binders, etc. Okay, so this next one is Joe's Blue, which is PB15, which is a phthalo blue, I believe, which is very bright. So other than this red, which if you kind of wanted to do the like the printer type colors, yellow, cyan, and magenta, you would have to have magenta here, obviously. But this is a pretty good primary palette as is. So let's go on to the next one, which is the Joe's Green, which is a phthalo green. Yeah, these are all super vibrant and nice. I'm actually gonna so I'm gonna save this spot for the core watercolors, and I'm gonna try doing a little bit of color mixing here on the paper. So let's go ahead and try the yellow. Oop, looks like I still had some green in there. The yellow and the red. Okay, that red is very, very strong, so you're getting more reddish orange. Let's add a little bit more yellow to that. There you go, you can get a really nice saturated orange. Okay, and then let's do the yellow and the blue. And again, you know, usually in mixes you have to add more yellow than you do the other color because it's not quite as strong. This is, yeah, I was gonna say this blue is very strong, so we're probably gonna get a more tealish green, although that's a pretty good green and actually is pretty close to this green. So you probably could get away with not having that color in your palette. Now I'm going to do the blue and the red. So I'm gonna do the red first. Probably both are pretty strong, so we'll see. Yeah, so I do get more of a grayish color here. Let me add a little bit more red. See if we can move that a little bit more towards purple. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, these are really nice, vibrant colors, and that orange is actually gorgeous. Okay, so let's see, what should I mix the green with? Let's mix it with the red to see if we can get a black, because sometimes you can get a pretty decent, or at least a pretty decent neutral with red and green. So that'll be the last color here. And there we go. Okay, so that just made it a dark green, so I'm gonna add more red here. Although that's a beautiful dark green with that phthalo green. Add a little bit more red. Yeah, so now we're going more towards brown. And maybe if I go back again with a little bit more green, let's see what we do. You're sure to get a neutral if you mix the right amounts of the red and the green. Whether you can get a true black really depends on the pigments. Okay, so let's just call this a brown neutral with the two of those combined. All right, so I'm gonna leave that. And none of these have any granulation in them, so they're pretty much just pure transparent pigments. I think each of these would probably be classified as transparent. If you added more water to all of these, you could get a pretty nice transparent wash, I guess. But the nice thing about these the store branded watercolors is that they tend to be a little bit cheaper than some of the other big brands of watercolor. So I think this would be a perfectly passable watercolor brand to try out if you want to try some artist quality watercolors that may be a little bit less expensive. They're not going to be dirt cheap, but they'll probably be a little less expensive. Oops, oh geez, I got my little, there was a little sheet of, I don't know, parchment or something over the colors, and then they got into them while they were wet. Okay, I'm gonna put this over here, and the colors we have here are, I'll just show you that real quick, are cobalt teal, green gold, nickel azo yellow, transparent pyrrole orange, quinacridone magenta, and dioxazine purple. So those are some good colors from them. I've used, I don't know if I would use the purple, but I've used most of these. So this is the cobalt teal. So you can already see, although this is a pretty opaque pigment, but I can already see a little bit of a difference between these and these. You're gonna get super saturated with core. They're kind of like top of the line watercolors. Okay, here's your green gold, gorgeous. Love that color. And then we're gonna do the Nickel Azo Yellow. And Nickel Azo Yellow is known for being kind of a pushy color. So I'm gonna try and do a little bit of mixing at the end. I'm gonna touch colors together to see how they flow. Okay, and then this is the transparent Pyrrole Orange, which is like nuclear orange. I mean, even though these are really bright colors, you can always mix colors with its complement to tone them down a little bit. So bright colors are not necessarily like if you only use bright colors, you can only use bright colors because you can tone them down. So that's the quinacridone magenta. Oh, and let me do the last one and then I'll tell you what the pigments are. So this last one, oh, and that was very seriously pigmented. I mean, these are all super pigmented. So the teal is PG50, which is pretty standard for a cobalt teal. Green gold is PY129. The nickel azo yellow is PY150. The pyrrole orange, transparent pyrrole orange, is PO71. So these are, again, all single pigments. This is PR122, which tends to be my favorite magenta pigment. They're not always PR122. And then this one is dioxazine purple, which is PV23. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a little circle of each of these and then touch them down here at the bottom. And we're gonna see how each of them flows into each other. Because that's kind of, I'm gonna use a lot of water too, so that we can enhance that. Because that's kind of what core watercolors are known for, is their flow. So let's get a pretty wet swatch there. And then I'm going to do a pretty wet swatch of the nickel, or the green gold. So you can see that's already flowing into that. I'm going to add a little bit more water here so that we can do that again. And the effect here is always going to be impacted by the amount of pigment and the amount of water that you're using. So I'm trying to load up my brush. Oh, it's kind of interesting because this nickel azo yellow is known for being kind of pushy, and it is actually not pushy in this circumstance. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so let's go with the orange. Yeah, very strange that it would not be pushy. Okay, and I'm trying to load up my brush pretty good with some water for each one. And then, so you can see the orange is going into, and so this yellow is going into the orange is going into the purple. There's so many factors in this kind of thing. Oh, and that dioxazine purple is just so strong. But as you can see, the magenta is clearly pushier because it's pushing into that color. So there you go. And I think I will do just a basic mix because we do have a magenta and a yellow. So I'm going to do a mix with those two so we can get an orange. Let's see how close it is to the transparent pyrrole orange. That is a single pigment. So if you're into single pigments, that's what you're going to get. Oh, it's definitely pretty rich here. And this is probably more red heavy than yellow, but look at that gorgeous, gorgeous color. And maybe we'll do one more. Let's see, what should we do? Maybe teal and purple. I actually have no idea what that would do. I don't usually use purple in most of my palettes, so I'm not used to mixing with purple too much. But let's try it with the cobalt teal and see what we get. And that purple is so strong, so I'm not going to put a lot in there. Oh, okay, so you just get sort of a lighter purple, really. And because that purple is so strong, I'm going to add a little bit more of the teal. They're both pretty strong colors. Yeah, so you get kind of like a cornflower blue bordering on lavender color there, which is really super pretty. But I mean, you can even see as these are drying, the core colors are retaining a lot more vibrancy than these. But again, it's not a true comparison because it's not exact pigment to pigment here. So I definitely still think core is like top of the line color. Dog fur on here always. So let's go back through here and see what we have. So these are the Joe's brand, Cheap Joe's watercolor brand, and this one is Joe's Yellow, which is PY154. This one is Joe's Red, which is PR254. This is Joe's Blue, which is PB15. This is Joe's Green, which is PB7. And then here we mix the yellow and the red. Here we mixed the yellow and the blue. Here we mixed the red and the blue, and here we mixed red and green. You can actually see it's bordering on black now that it's drying. So maybe if I just adjusted, because it's a delicate balance. it's hard to get true black because you have to get kind of the ratios just right. But that is actually it's a very dark neutral, if nothing else. Okay, and so then here we have the core watercolors. This is Cobalt Teal, which is PG50. This one is Green Gold, which is PY129. This one is Nickel Azo Yellow, which is PY150. Transparent Pyrrole Orange, PO71. Quinacridone Magenta, PR122. And then Dioxazine Purple, which is PV23, which is a single pigment purple. And then here you can see all of the pigments and how they run into each other. So you can definitely see that the orange is pushier than either of these because it's going into both colors here. And the yellow, I think it's kind of neutral with the green gold here because it's not really moving one way or another, which is interesting because, like I said, the Nickel Azo Yellow is typically known as a pushy color. And then the Cobalt Teal is clearly pushing into the green. The magenta is clearly pushing into the purple. So you could do a whole page of playing around with what colors flow into what. It's always really fun. And then this is the yellow plus the magenta, which created this beautiful deep orange here. Really, really beautiful and very different from the transparent pyrrole orange. Here we have sort of a cornflower blue bordering on lavender with the teal and the purple. So there we go. But I don't think, I mean, I know that the core colors are pretty expensive per tube. Sometimes you can find deals on the sets. I've actually found some pretty good deals on the sets at Jerry's Artorama in the United States. I don't think you're going to find similar deals at like Jackson's because these are made in the United States. And I suspect that probably a well-known brand does produce these colors for Cheap Joe's, but I do not know which brand that is. You might be able to do a little bit of Googling to find out, but these are perfectly passable artist grade watercolors, especially if you're more into the transparent with no granulation. These also do not have a lot of granulation, the core colors, but there are some that have quite a bit, like this Cobalt Teal is pretty much across brands going to be granulating, but I think all of the other colors are not. You're always going to come across some colors consistent across brands that are going to have probably some granulation. Cobalt Teal, I think every brand has a little bit of granulation. Ultramarine Blue generally has granulation, although there are some brands that have, like Schminke makes a few variants on Ultramarine Blue. Some are more granulating than others. It just depends on what you like. I love granulation, but I still love these core colors, even though the majority of them are not granulating, just because they're so beautiful and vibrant. And like I said, just because they're vibrant doesn't mean you can't tone down colors. Let's try the magenta and the teal together to see if we can tone down, because those are almost at the opposite ends of the color wheel. So we should get a little bit more of a toned down color with those two. You can get sort of a softer pink there, softer pinkish purple. And they do make earth colors, so you can also tone things down with that. But that's obviously not as nuclear as this magenta, and it's kind of a nice, subtle thing. And you probably could mute things down a little bit with the green gold as well. Let's try the magenta again with the green gold and see what happens. Oops. Yeah, so you can definitely get a more earthy tone there. So like I said, just because you have bright colors in your palette does not mean you can't have earth colors. You can always use something that's almost opposite on the color wheel or opposite the color on the color wheel to mute down your brighter colors. All right, well, that's all I had for you today. Feel free to subscribe to keep track of future videos on my channel. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. Feel free to ask any questions about these paints below and I'll answer when I can. And I hope to see you next time, but in the meantime, have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.